Welcome back to another video. I thought I'd do a quick review and test on another vintage lens. This time it's the Minolta 80-200mm HS APO-G. All the specs are on screen for you and there are quite a few to digest there, so have a look through. You'll note that there is a fairly long minimum focus distance on this lens, around 1.8 meters. Here's a quick shot where I got the price back in 2005 on this lens, so you can see it's a fair bit cheaper than the newer lens that came out. And whilst I'm showing you the design of the body here, we have a focus hold switch on the left hand side. There's your threads which are on the tripod collar. Unfortunately, the collar on this can't be easily removed, it's fixed in place. You do have the adjuster so you can turn it around, and there's also dot markings just to give you a bit of a guideline on that. So you do get used to it, but it does sometimes get in the way. That's the only drawback with that fixed collar. Back of the lens we have 5 contact points and it's screw driven, this lens. There's no internal motor, it's driven from the body. Nice action on the zoom ring. That's very smooth and quite well dampened actually. You will note however that the front element does rotate and extend a bit. So that could be an issue with the filters, polarizers. Metal lens hood. That's also finished in the same white, and it has some kind of powder coating on the inside. It gives off a matte finish, so there's no chance of reflections, and the bottom part of that bayonet is plastic. There's no markings on this for attaching, so what I normally do is just put the Minolta name just to the right hand side. This doesn't fully lock in place like most of the bayonet hoods. Quick shot through the front element, you can see the curved aperture blades, and there's a lot of reflections coming back because there's so many elements in this lens. They're quite complicated designs optically. Focus is really fast on this lens and you can actually feel the torque inside the lens when you press the button to focus. Give you a side-by-side comparison now. Some of the other telephoto lenses with the beer can in the middle and 100-200mm on the right hand side. The 100-200mm is the only lens that has external zooming, so that it extends. The other two are both internal zoom action on those, so they never extend out. At 70mm it reports 75 on the beer can, and you'll notice compared to the 80 it is a slightly wider field of view. We go up to the 200mm and you'll see that they're pretty much the same between the 100 and 200 and the 80-200, with obviously the beer can being a little bit narrower, so you are getting your 200mm off of this lens. Working on the test shots now, starting at 80mm wide open, I don't see any difference, virtually no difference in the middle of the image. It just looks exactly the same. Even when you started to stop it down, there's almost no difference at all. 135mm, there's just a tiny difference that you just wouldn't see by stopping the lens down. I stopped it quite a bit down to f5.6. On the edges, a fraction improvement when you've stopped it down that little bit. Moving up to 200mm now, and lenses can sometimes be a bit weak here, and there's really nothing to fault on the Minolta wide open f2.8 pretty much across the frame. Every shot that I took with this in the focal plane, it's virtually no improvement at all stopping it down, and that is very unusual to see that degree of resolution and sharpness on a lens of this type. So the takeaway from this is it's definitely very usable wide open across the entire focal range. Slightly weaker at 135mm, but very small difference. Wanted to take a deeper dive into the rendering and not just smashing out the background, but areas which can be further and closer away, just to see if I could get some of that edginess that you can sometimes see on these lenses. And the good news with the Minolta is it's super smooth in the out of focus areas, and I've tested quite a few shots, a lot of different distances to try and get some kind of strange effects, because you can often get this on lenses. Even the brand new lenses out now, they often have actually quite a few problems with the out of focus areas, so even stopping it down still got very smooth transition from into out of focus. We've got the APO elements which help correct the chromatic aberration, but those spherical elements in modern lenses can really mess up the out of focus areas. There's not even a hint of any outlining or any of that onion ring pattern that you can often see even in the best lenses that are out today. And I tested this at a lot of different focal lengths, different apertures, stopping it down, different distances away, and everything just melts away into the background. I'd say it's probably by quite some margin the best lens that I've used for this particular effect, where you're going to get a very smooth transition from the in to the outer focus areas. The other surprising element is that you normally have a weaker performance at the shorter focal length, and in this case it just didn't seem to make any difference. It's still very smooth and very pleasing out to focus areas. You do get some of the cat eye effect in the corner. That's an optical characteristic where it sort of goes into an ellipse shape, but that you get that on every single faster aperture lens. You'll see that in the corners, and it's really not that bad on this lens. A few other test shots that I did, again very tricky shots with a very busy background. I can't see any edginess or outlining or anything which could potentially be distracting. Now you could say this doesn't particularly matter, because for the type of shots that you do, maybe you're doing portraits or action shots and people aren't going to take much attention to it. But I did want to look at this area because I was really surprised how well the lens did. Even with really busy scenes, a lot of things going on in the background, I just couldn't find anything, any focal length, and even stopping it down, that was annoying or visually distracting. And it's often overlooked with lens reviews. People will say, you know, the background looks great and everything, but they don't test it at different distances, so they don't really reveal the potential problems. Let's take a look at the distortion. There's a bit of barrel. It's quite mild at the 80mm mark. As I said earlier, it's a little bit longer than 80mm, probably about 82 or 3mm. Excellent sharpness across the frame, as I said earlier. There is a little bit of vignetting. I haven't really found it to be much of a problem, to be honest. You can see it a bit more at 200mm, but it really isn't that strong at all. At 200mm, you can see there is a bit of pincushion. I'd call it moderate pincushion. Good contrast and resolution across the frame, 200mm. A couple of shots now just to try and get the lens flare problems, and I didn't really have that many problems. Didn't have the hood on for these shots, and I was shooting directly into the sun. Yes, there is a little bit of flare, but it really isn't that bad at all, and I was trying different angles. You'll see it might vary a little bit depending on the focal length, but it's not much of a problem. You can sometimes see some chromatic aberration. Here we can see some purple fringing, high contrast. Although it's relatively straightforward to remove, you might have to tweak it a bit. Onto APS-C 200mm F2.8, and it performs just as well on APS-C as it does with full frame. Useful to have that narrow field of view if you're a bit further away, so these lenses are quite useful on a crop sensor as well. So my overall summary with the Minolta is a very impressive performance optically. Obviously it's not a cheap lens, but it is relatively affordable on the used market. Excellent resolution, good contrast, and it has that classic Minolta look. There are obviously some drawbacks with the lens. The long minimum focus distance, we have no weather sealing on it, that fixed tripod collar that you can't take off. As far as the optics goes though, it's pretty much top of the tree, and it still seems to hang in there with the modern lenses, and in some cases it probably beats some of them. If you've got any questions, do leave a comment below. Any thoughts on this lens? And thanks for watching. I will see you in my next one.